ho, ho, gather close, my merry friends. Pull up your blankets tight, wiggle your toes into the coziest spot you can find, and let the world slow down for a little bit. Tonight's story is about books, imagination, kindness, and one very unusual surprise. Because this was not just an ordinary book. No. This was a book that had a story of its own. Tonight's tale is called The Book That Read Back. In the snowy little village of Pineberry Hollow, there stood a tiny library tucked between a cocoa shop and a clock store that was always 3 minutes late. Nobody knew why. The librarian, Miss Brumblewick, claimed the clocks were thinking deeply. The library itself was warm and welcoming with glowing lanterns, squeaky wooden floors, and shelves that stretched all the way to the ceiling. Children loved it there, adults loved it there, even the village cat, Marmalade, loved it there, though he mostly used the history section as a nap station. One Saturday morning, children gathered for story hour, and every Saturday morning, 12-year-old Oliver Reed sat in the front row. Oliver loved books more than almost anything. He loved adventures, mysteries, funny stories, stories about dragons who disliked spicy soup. Spicy soup? Stories about pirates who were afraid of seagulls. Stories about heroes who discovered courage when they least expected it. Books made Oliver feel like the world was bigger than it looked outside his bedroom window. But Oliver had one small problem. He was very quiet. Not shy exactly, just careful. At school, he often knew the answer but did not raise his hand. At lunch, he listened more than he spoke, and when people asked him what he wanted to be someday, he usually shrugged and said, "I'm still thinking." Mrs. Brumblewick once told him, "Quiet people often have the loudest imaginations." Oliver liked that. One snowy afternoon, Oliver hurried into the library while snowflakes danced outside like tiny feather pillows floating through the air. Mrs. Brumblewick stood behind the desk organizing return books. "Good afternoon, Oliver," she said warmly. "Good afternoon. You're just in time." "For what?" Mrs. Brumblewick leaned closer. "A surprise." Oliver's eyes widened. Libraries rarely used the word surprise unless something magical was involved. Mrs. Brumblewick handed him a small brass key. "This arrived this morning. For me? It seems so." Attached to the key was a tag that read, "For the child who truly listens to stories." Oliver blinked. "That's mysterious." Mrs. Brumblewick smiled. "Libraries are full of mysterious things. Last week I found a sandwich inside a poetry book." "That's not mysterious," Oliver said. "That's lunch with poor planning." Mrs. Brumblewick laughed. "Come with me." She led Oliver through the library, past the towering shelves and reading chairs, all the way to the very back corner where few people ever went. There stood a narrow wooden door. Oliver had never noticed it before. Mrs. Brumblewick pointed to the lock. "Try the key." Oliver slid the brass key into the lock. Click! The door creaked open. Inside was a tiny round room filled with old books, glowing lanterns, and a floating dust sparkles that looked almost magical. In the center stood a single pedestal, and on the pedestal rested a thick blue book with silver edges. The book read, "The Book That Read Back." Oliver stared. "That's the title?" Mrs. Brumblewick nodded slowly. "Some books tell stories," she said. "This one listens too." Oliver looked unsure. "That sounds impossible." Mrs. Brumblewick smiled. "So does snow falling from clouds until you really think about it." Oliver carefully picked up the book. It felt warm, not hot, just warm, like it had been sitting near a fireplace. Can I open it? That, Mrs. Brumblewick, is usually how books work. Oliver laughed slowly and opened the cover. The first page was blank. Then words slowly appeared across the paper. Hello, Oliver Reed. Oliver nearly dropped the book. The book changed again. Please hold on to me. Falling is embarrassing. Oliver grabbed the book tighter. You can write? The ink swirled. You can talk. We all have talents. Oliver stared, then he laughed. A real laugh, not the quite polite kind. The surprise kind that jumps out before you can stop it. This is incredible. The words shimmered. Thank you. I moisturized. Oliver sat cross-legged on the floor, and Mrs. Brumblewick smiled knowingly from the doorway. I'll leave you two to meet properly. And with that, she quietly closed the door. Oliver looked back at the door. So you can really talk? Technically, I write. Talking would smudge the pages. Oliver grinned. What are you? A listening book? I read stories and readers. That's complicated. It is. I once gave a headache to a dictionary. Oliver laughed again. The book's pages turned by themselves. Now then, Oliver Reed, what kind of story do you like best? Oliver thought for a moment. Adventure stories. The page glowed. Interesting. You enjoy brave characters. Well, yes. Do you think you are brave? Oliver blinked. I don't know. The pages stayed still for a moment then. We may need several chapters for this conversation. For the next hour, Oliver talked with the book, or rather the book asked questions and occasionally made jokes that were surprisingly good for an object made of paper. Oliver told it about school, about loving stories, about wanting to speak up but never quite finding the courage. The book listened carefully, and then it wrote, You know, most heroes begin their stories unsure of themselves. Oliver smiled. I guess that's true. Imagine if every hero started by saying, I have complete confidence and excellent hair. Stories would be terrible boring. Oliver laughed so hard he snorted a little. The book pages fluttered proudly. Ah, yes, genuine laughter, a wonderful sound. As evening approached, Oliver carefully closed the book. Can I come back tomorrow? The silver letters appeared slowly. I certainly hope so. It's getting very lonely staring at one wall. The next day, Oliver returned after school, and the day after that, soon visiting the listening book became his favorite part of the week. Sometimes the book told stories about hidden kingdoms, talking snowflakes, and the adventurous squirrels who believed acorns were treasure maps. But more often, the book asked Oliver questions. Questions nobody else really asked. What makes you happiest? Drawing? Why don't you show people your drawings? Because they might not like them. Fear, an annoying little goblin. Or, if you could tell your class one thing, what would it be? Oliver thought carefully. That everybody worries more than they pretend to. The pages glowed softly. That is a wise observation for someone your age. One afternoon, Oliver brought his sketchbook. The book seemed delighted. Finally, visual aids! Oliver flipped through the pages nervously. There was drawings of forests, castles, strange creatures, and funny little cartoon villages. One drawing showed a turtle wearing roller skates. The book paused on that one. I have questions. He's fast, Oliver explained. Clearly. Another drawing showed a boy standing at the edge of a cliff looking towards a glowing city. The book lingered there longer. You drew this boy carefully, Oliver nodded. I think he wants to go forward, but he's scared. The page shimmered. Do you think he eventually steps forward? Oliver looked at the drawing quietly. I hope so. And the book turned one page very gently. Sometimes hope is the beginning of courage. Now, my dear friends, something important was happening. Without realizing it, Oliver was beginning to change little by little, like sunrise slowly filling the sky. At school, he raised his hand once during a science class, only halfway, but still. During lunch, he told Willa and Marcus one of the book jokes. What do you call a sleepy dragon? He asked. Marcus shrugged. A napkin. Willa groaned loudly. That was terrible. Thank you, said Oliver proudly, and for the first time in a long time he felt himself relaxing around other people. One snowy Thursday afternoon, Mrs. Weaver, Oliver's teacher, made an announcement. Next week, she said, our class will present original stories at the Winter Creativity Festival. The class buzzed with excitement. We can write stories, asked Willa, or poems, said Marcus, or interpretive dance, said Benny from the back. Mrs. Weaver looked cautious. Let's stay flexible. Oliver's stomach twisted. A story presentation meant standing in front of everybody, talking, reading out loud. His heart immediately began planning an escape route. That evening, Oliver sat with his listening book in the hiding room, in the hidden library room. I can't do it, he said. The pages flipped. Interesting. What? You said the same thing about speaking in class, and then you did. That was different. Was it? Oliver frowned. What if I mess up? The silver letters appeared slowly. What if you shine? Oliver looked away. I'm not that confident, kids. The book paused and then wrote, Oliver, confidence is not something people are born carrying around like extra socks. Oliver laughed softly. Confidence grows each time we try something difficult. The pages turned slowly. Besides, stories are meant to be shared. Imagine if birds refused to sing because they worried about reviews. That would be strange. Exactly. The forest would be very quiet and dramatically less cheerful. Oliver leaned back against the wall. What if people laugh? The book replied instantly. Then make sure you're telling a funny part. Oliver laughed again. The book continued. Listen carefully now. Brave does not mean fearless. Brave means doing something important even while your knees feel wiggly. Oliver looked down. My knees do get wiggly. Excellent. That means you're preparing for courage. Over the next few days, Oliver worked on his story. He wrote about a tiny lantern keeper who believed his light was too small to matter, until one stormy night helped him discover otherwise. The listening book helped him revise, sometimes kindly, sometimes honestly. The sentence is lovely. This sentence, however, wandered off and forgot where it was doing. Or, excellent ending, I nearly cried ink. By the night before the festival, Oliver was still nervous, very nervous. The next day, the school auditorium filled with families, cocoa cups, scarves, and excited chatter. Students took turns presenting. Willa read a funny poem about a goose who stole pancakes. Marcus performed a magic trick involving disappearing marshmallows. Benny attempted interpreted dance. Nobody fully understood it, but they applauded politely. Then Mrs. Weaver smiled towards Oliver. And now Oliver read. Oliver stood slowly. His hands shook a little. His knees definitely wiggled. He stepped to the front holding his papers. For 1 second he wanted to run away. Then he remembered the listening book. Brave means doing something important even when your knees feel wiggly. Oliver took a breath and began reading. At first his voice was quiet, but as the story continued, something wonderful happened. The room listened, really listened. People leaned forward, children smiled, adults nodded softly. When Oliver reached the funny parts, people laughed. When he reached the emotional ending, the room grew beautifully still. And when he finished, the audience burst into applause. Real applause, warm applause. The kind that wraps around you like a blanket. Oliver looked out at the crowd in amazement. Mrs. Weaver smiled proudly. Willa gave him 2 thumbs up. Marcus whispered loudly, "That was awesome!" And somewhere deep inside Oliver, something opened. Not loudly, not dramatically, but truly. That evening, Oliver rushed to the hidden library room. I did it! I did it!" he said breathlessly. The book's pages flipped excitedly. "I know, Mrs. Brunswick already told me. She was so proud she alphabeticalized the shelf twice." Oliver laughed. "I was terrified, and yet you still did it." The silver letters glowed warmly. Ah, there it is, what? The moment you discover that courage was inside you all along. Oliver sat quietly for a moment. Then he asked, "Why do people help people?" Well, why do you help people? The pages turned slowly because stories are not just meant to entertain us. The next sentence appeared carefully. They help us become who we are meant to be. Oliver looked around the little hidden room. The lantern lights glowed softly against the walls. Snow drifted outside the tiny window, and suddenly the room felt even more magical than before. Not because the book could write, not because it glowed, not because it listened, really listened, and somehow, though it questions and stories and ridiculous jokes, it helped people hear themselves more clearly too. Oliver smiled. "You know something? Many things. I'm extremely well read." Oliver laughed. "I think you're my favorite book." The silver letters shimmered happily. "Please do not tell the dictionaries. They are very competitive." From that day on, Oliver visited often, not because he needed courage anymore. Well, not because of that, but because he discovered something important. Stories were not just adventures on paper. They were mirrors, windows, lanterns. Sometimes they showed us who we really were, and sometimes they helped us become brave enough to grow into something new. And deep in the hidden room of Pineberry Hollow Library, the listening book waited patiently for its next reader, ready to listen, ready to encourage, ready with terrible jokes and surprisingly wise advice. Because every child had a story inside them worth hearing, and every once in a while, the right story reads us back. Here's the moral of the story. Stories have the power to help us discover courage, kindness, creativity, and confidence within ourselves. Sometimes we feel unsure, nervous, and afraid to share our voice. But growth happens when we take small, brave steps forward anyway. True courage does not mean never feeling scared. It means believing that what we have to share matters. When we listen carefully to others and to ourselves, we begin to understand that every person carries a unique story worth telling. Wasn't that awesome, boys and girls, mums and dads? Do you have a story to tell? Santa would love to listen. Come back again tomorrow for another amazing tale during Storytime by Santa. Ho, ho, ho! Santa loves you. Ho, 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 good evening, good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to another Story Time by Santa. Come in close, my merry friends, snuggle up in your blankets, wiggle your toes into the coziest spot you can find and get ready for a story full of laughter, kindness, and one important lesson. Tonight's story is called The Fox Who Learned to Tell the Truth. Even in a bright green forest where the sun played peekaboo through the leaves and the creek sang carefully cheerful songs over the rocks, there lived a young fox named Felix. Now, Felix had a soft red coat, a fluffy white tipped tail, and a bright golden eyes that sparkled with ideas. Oh, he had ideas, all right. Felix was clever, very clever, sometimes too clever. He could find blackberries before the birds did. He could sneak past crunchy leaves without making a sound, and he could talk his way out of almost anything. That last one, my friends, is where the trouble began. You see, Felix had a very little habit. When something went wrong, he didn't always tell the truth. Sometimes he stretched the truth like taffy. Sometimes he bent the truth like a willow branch. And sometimes he hid the truth behind such a big smile that folks almost forgot to ask questions. Almost. One sunny morning, Felix was helping Mrs. Bramble the badger stack jars of honey in her little woodland shop. Careful now, Mrs. Bramble said, adjusting her spectacles. Those jars are sticky, slippery, and surprisingly bouncy. Honey jars don't bounce, said Felix. Mrs. Bramble raised one eyebrow. That sounds like a sentence spoken by someone about to learn something. Felix chuckled. I'm as careful as a squirrel with a teacup. And at that very moment, his tail swished. One jar wobbled, then another, then boop, bump, plop. The honey jar rolled off the shelf, hit a wooden spoon, bounced off the basket of muffins, and landed upside down on the floor with a glorious sticky splat. Felix froze. Mrs. Bramble turned slowly. There was honey on the floor. There was honey on the spoon, honey on the baskets, honey on Felix's paw, and just a tiny spot of honey on the tip of his nose. Mrs. Bramble blinked. Felix blinked, and then Felix said, a breeze did it. A breeze? Said Mrs. Bramble repeated. Yes, said Felix, a strong, surprising, sneaky breeze, very unusual for indoors. Mrs. Bramble looked at the still curtains, then still leaves outside the window, then the perfectly calm room. Then she looked back at Felix's honey-covered paw. Well, she said, that must have been a very talented breeze. Felix gave a weak little grin. That's what I thought. Mrs. Bramble handed him a rag. Clean it up, please. Felix cleaned in silence, and his ears felt hot. Still, he told himself it wasn't a big lie, just a tiny one, a little puff of a lie, like a dandelion seed, except, as you may know, every tiny seed can grow into big things. That afternoon, Felix met his friends by the creek. There was Tilly the turtle, who moved slowly but thought quickly. There was Jasper the rabbit, who could not whisper even when he tried. And then there was Millie the mouse, who carried a notebook because she liked writing things down. Interesting things such as cloud shapes and sandwich ideas. Hello, Felix called Jasper. Do you want to race leaves in the creek? I'd love to, Felix said. They each picked a leaf and set them gently in the water. Jasper cheered his leaf so loudly that it got stuck against a pebble. Encouragement is everything, he said. Millie wrote that down. Tilly smiled. Felix, did you help Mrs. Bramble all morning? I did, said Felix. How did it go? Asked Millie. Felix hesitated. He could have told the truth. He could have said, I dropped the honey jar and blamed the breeze. But instead, he straightened his shoulders and said, perfectly. Mrs. Bramble said I was the most careful helper she's ever had. Tilly looked impressed. Jasper gasped, the most careful? Millie wrote that down too. Felix's leaf sailed forward in the water. So did the lie. Later that week, the forest school held its annual autumn fair planning meeting in the clearing. There would be games, music, pies, storytelling tent, and a grand lantern parade at sunset. Everybody had a job. Mrs. Wren, the teacher, stood on a stump with a list. Tilly, you will help organize the acorn toss. Tilly nodded. Jasper, you will carry messages. I shall deliver them with speed and drama, Jasper declared. Mrs. Wren smiled. Less drama, more speed, please. Well, I can try. Millie, you'll help with signs. Millie held up 3 pencils proudly. And Felix, said Mrs. Wren, you may help me guard the special lantern for the parade. All the animals oohed and awed. The special lantern was beautiful, round and golden and with tiny star-shaped cutouts. When lit, it sprinkled starry patterns across the ground. It must be handled with great care, said Mrs. Wren. Can I trust you? Felix stood up tall. Absolutely. And then he meant it. He truly, truly meant it. But later that afternoon, while Mrs. Wren stepped away to help with bunting, Felix sat beside the lantern trying very hard to be responsible. Very hard. That afternoon for almost 7 whole minutes. Then Jasper bounced over carrying a message bag. Felix, guess what? The pie contest now has 14 pies. That's excellent news, Felix said, and one pie is blueberry cinnamon crumble maple. Felix stared. That sounds almost too powerful. I know. Jasper peered into the lantern. May I look? Only look, said Felix. Millie scampered over too. It's lovely. Tilly arrived more slowly, but that's because she arrived likely with dignity. The 4 friends gathered around the lantern. It would look even prettier lit, Jasper said. Mrs. Wren left a box of matches nearby for later. Felix looked at the matches, then at the lantern, then back at the matches. We probably shouldn't, said Tilly. Probably not, said Millie. Almost certainly not, said Tilly again. Felix nodded, then Jasper whispered, just for one teeny tiny peek. Now, my friends, whenever someone says teeny tiny peek, there is a good chance a story is about to become more interesting. Felix looked around. No Mrs. Wren, no teacher, no grown-ups, only curious faces. I'll be careful, Felix said. He struck one match. The lantern glowed softly. Golden stars danced across the grass. Ooh, said Millie. It's magical, whispered Tilly. Jasper spun in circles. I'm in the sky, I'm in the sky. Then he tripped on his own foot, which made Felix jump, which made the match drop, which made Felix lunge for it, which made his elbow bump the lantern. The lantern tipped, rolled, and bumped against a tree root. The glass door popped open and one tiny star-shaped panel snapped right off. Silence. Jasper's mouth fell open. Millie clutched her notebook. Tilly closed her eyes. Felix picked up the broken panel with trembling paws. Oh no, he whispered. Just then, Mrs. Wren returned. Ta-da! Her eyes went straight to the lantern, then to the broken piece in Felix's paw. What happened here? She asked gently. Felix's heart thumped. He could feel the truth right there, ready to come out. But then fear rushed in. Fear of getting into trouble. Fear of disappointing everyone. Fear of losing their trust. And so he said, I found it like this. The words landed like stones. Tilly looked down. Millie blinked sadly. Jasper stared at Felix as if he had just announced that carrots grew on clouds. Mrs. Wren was quiet for a long time. I see, she said at last. Felix waited for her to say more, but she only took the lantern and walked away slowly. That evening the forest felt different. The birds still sang, the breeze still danced through the branches, but Felix felt as if a pebble had settled inside his chest. A heavy one. The next morning he found the things were, odd. Not terrible, just odd. When he greeted Millie, she smiled, but it was just a small smile. Then he offered to help Tilly carry leaves. She said, "Thank you, but I'm all right." Then Jasper came by with messages. He talked very fast about mushrooms and trade routes and anything at all except the lantern. Felix didn't like it, not one little bit. By afternoon, he had wandered to the old willow tree where Grandpa Owl often napped and thought wise thoughts. Grandpa Owl was not truly everyone's grandpa, but he listened so well that half the forest called him Grandpa anyway. Felix found him polishing his spectacles with a mossy handkerchief. "You looked like you swallowed a pine cone," Grandpa Owl said. Felix sighed. "I feel worse than that." "Sit," said Grandpa Owl. Felix sat. For a while they listened to the creek. Then Grandpa Owl said, "Would you like to tell me what happened, or shall I guess wildly and assume you tried to teach squirrels opera?" Felix gave a tiny laugh. "No opera." "Pity. Continue." So Felix told him everything. The honey jar, the careful helper lie, the lantern, the broken panel, the lie about finding it that way. When he finished, Grandpa Owl folded his wings. My, he said softly, "that is rather tangled string." Felix stared at the ground. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "Most folks don't," said Grandpa Owl. "Trouble rarely sends a note ahead of time. It just didn't want everybody upset with me." Grandpa Owl nodded. "And now?" "Now they seem upset anyway." Felix looked up. "Why is telling the truth so hard sometimes?" Grandpa Owl smiled kindly, "Because telling the truth sometimes takes courage, and a lie can feel like a quick little bridge over trouble. But often it is made of paper, and paper bridges do not hold for long." Felix thought about that. "What should I do?" Grandpa Owl leaned closer. "Tell the truth, fully, kindly, without excuses. Then do what you can to make things right." Felix swallowed. "What if they're disappointed?" "They might be." "What if they're angry?" "They might be." Felix drooped. Grandpa Owl twinkled. "And what if they're also relieved to hear honesty at last?" Felix blinked. "I hadn't thought of that." Grandpa Owl chuckled. "That's why I keep extra thoughts around." So Felix took a deep breath, thanked Grandpa Owl, and went to find Mrs. Wren. She was at the schoolhouse tying ribbons onto little parade baskets. Felix's paws shook. "Mrs. Wren?" She turned. "Yes, Felix. I need to tell you something." She set down the ribbon. Felix took the biggest breath he had ever taken in his fox life. "I didn't find the lantern broken. I lit it when I wasn't supposed to. Jasper tripped. I got startled and I knocked it over. And I was scared, so I lied." The room suddenly went very quiet. Felix continued, his voice wobbling just a little. "I'm sorry. I should have told the truth right away. I was careless and I made it worse." Mrs. Wren looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me the truth." Felix blinked. You're not roaring." Mrs. Wren smiled. "I'm a wren, dear. Roaring would be unusual." Felix laughed, even though his eyes felt stingy. "I am disappointed you were careless," she said, "and I'm more disappointed that you lied." Felix looked down. "I know." But she added, "I am very proud that you came back and told the truth on your own." Hope flickered in Felix's chest. "Can I fix it?" he asked. "As a matter of fact," said Mrs. Wren, "Mr. Beaver believed he can repair the lantern frame if someone helps polish and prepare it. And all the parade signs still need to be hanging." Felix stood straighter. "I'll do both." And then he did. He worked beside Mr. Beaver, who was excellent with careful paws and tiny tools. He polished the lantern until it gleamed. He carried signs with Millie. He tied ribbons with Tilly. He even apologized to Jasper. "I'm sorry," Felix said quietly. Jasper's ears drooped. "I should have listened when Tilly said not to light it." Tilly nodded. "Maybe, but I'm the one who lied." Jasper thought about that, then gave Felix a quick hug. Next time, Jasper said, we shall make better choices before the blueberry cinnamon crumble maple pie distracts us. That seems wise, said Felix. By sunset on Fair Day, the forest glowed with laughter. Children tossed acorns, families shared pies, music twinkled through the clearing, and when it was finally time for the lantern parade, Mrs. Wren lifted the special lantern high. It shone more brightly than ever. Golden stars danced over every smiling face. Then Mrs. Wren surprised everyone. "Felix," she said, "would you do me the honor of carrying the lantern in front of the parade?" The whole clearing turned to look at him. Felix's mouth fell open. "Me. You," said Mrs. Wren, "not only because you were perfect, because you chose honesty and responsibility when it mattered." Felix held the lantern carefully, very, very carefully. As the parade moved through the forest, tiny stars shimmered over the path. Children laughed, grown-ups waved, even Grandpa Owl stayed awake for almost the entire thing, which was impressive. Jasper hopped beside Felix. "You look important." Felix grinned. "Do I?" "Very." Millie added, "I wrote down the whole story." Tilly smiled, especially the part where you told the truth. Felix looked up at the glowing lantern and felt something warm and steady in his heart. Not pride exactly, something better, peace. And from that day on, Felix still made mistakes sometimes. Oh yes, he once sat on a basket of muffins by accident. He once sneezed during a leaf painting session and decorated 3 hedgehogs. And once he announced with great confidence that he knew the shortcut to the berry hill and led everyone to a pond. Whenever something went wrong, he stopped, took a breath, and told the truth. Sometimes it was hard, sometimes his ears still got hot, but every single time the truth made the path straighter. And little by little, trust returned. Mrs. Bramble let him help in the shop again, though she did keep the honey on the lower shelf. Millie smiled bigger smiles. Tilly asked his opinion. Jasper just still trusted him with exciting news about pie. And Felix learned something important. A lie might seem small at first, but truth, even when it feels hard, makes room for friendship, trust, and second chances. Years later, whenever young foxes in the forest got tangled up in little fibs and worried looks, Felix would sit with them under the willow tree and say, "Let me tell you about the day I blamed Breeze for a honey jar." Usually that got a laugh. And then he'd smile and add, "The truth may feel difficult for a moment, but it makes your heart feel lighter for a very long time. And that, my merry friends, is a treasure worth carrying." Here's the moral of the story. Telling the truth takes courage, especially when we are afraid of making mistakes or disappointing others. But honestly, it's what builds trust, repairs friendships, and helps our hearts feel light again. When we choose to speak truthfully, take responsibility for our actions, and do our best to make things right, we show real strength, real kindness, and real care. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, wasn't that amazing? I like that story. I hope you did too. I hope you'll tell your friends that Santa reads stories. So come back another time and listen to a wonderful story by Santa Father John at Storytime by Santa. Ho, ho, ho! Santa loves you. Ho, 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 come gather close, my merry friends. Pull your blankets up, tuck your toes in, and settle your hearts into a cozy place, because tonight's story is about friendship, courage, and the wonderful magic of making someone feel welcome. At the very edge of Santa's village, just past the peppermint lamp posts and beside a hill where a young reindeer practiced careful takeoffs, stood a cheerful little school called the North Pole School of Wonder. Now, this was not an ordinary school. Oh no, 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 no. At the North Pole School, children and young elves learned reading, counting, kindness, toy design, snow science, cookie measuring, reindeer safety, and a very serious subject called glitter control. Glitter control was important because one time a student sneezed during craft class and the music room sparkled for 6 months. Every morning the school bell rang with joyful jingle jangle, and the students hurried inside wearing warm scarves, tiny boots, and excited smiles. The teacher, Mrs. Merriweather, greeted everybody at this door. Good morning, Tinsel. Good morning, Button. Good morning, Sprig. Good morning, Wobbles. Is that jam on your homework? Wobbles looked down. Possibly. Is it because you ate toast while doing math again? Possibly ×2. Mrs. Merriweather smiled and let him in. It was a bright Monday morning when something new happened. And when something new happens at the North Pole, everybody notices. Mrs. Merriweather clapped her hands gently at the front of the classroom. Class, we have a new student joining us today. The room grew quiet and the door opened. In stepped a small elf with round glasses, a green sweater, and a backpack nearly as big as he was. His name was Elliot Evergreen. Elliot had just moved to the North Pole from a small mountain village far away. Where the snow fell sideways, the trees grew very tall, and everybody made wooden whistles for fun. He stood at the front of the classroom holding the straps of his backpack. His cheeks were pink, his boots pointed forward, and the boots pointed inward. And his smile was the kind of smile that made trying very hard to be brave. Everyone, said Mrs. Merriweather, this is Elliot. Hi, Elliot, the class called. Elliot gave a tiny wave. It was so tiny that Button whispered, was that a wave or did his mitten blink? Tinsel giggled, but Mrs. Merriweather gave her kind look that said, let's be gentle. Elliot sat at an empty desk near the window. Outside, snowflakes drifted down like snow feathers. Inside, Elliot felt like every eye in the room was resting on him. He opened up his notebook, then closed it, then opened it again. Sometimes nervous hands like to look busy. Mrs. Merriweather began the morning lesson. Today we're going to be designing kindness ornaments for the giving tree. The students cheered. The giving tree stood at the school hallway, and each week students hung ornaments with kind messages written on them. Something like this, it said, you matter, you are brave, thank you for being you. Wobbles once wrote, cookies are proof that hope is crunchy. Interesting. No one knew exactly what it meant, but made people smile. So Mrs. Merriweather allowed it. The class began cutting paper stars, hearts, bells, and snowflakes. Elliot picked up a blue paper star and stared at it. He wanted to write something good, something meaningful, but his thoughts were all tangled. At the table beside him, Tinsel, Button, Sprig, and Wobbles were laughing. We should make a joke ornament, he said. Wobbles? Button grinned. What kind? Wobbles thought very seriously. What did the snowman bring? Why did the snowman bring a pencil? Sprig shrugged. Why? To draw a children's book. The table groaned. That was terrible, said Tinsel. Thank you, said Wobbles proudly. Elliot smiled a little, but he did not join in. He wanted to, and how he wanted to. But joining a group when you are new can feel like stepping onto ice and not knowing if it will hold. At lunch, the student gathered in the cafeteria, where warm soup steamed, cocoa was served in little red cups, and the lunch elf, Mr. Crumble, announced every meal as if it were a royal feast. Today's soup is carrot snowflake stew, he declared, made with 14 carrots and 1 dramatic onion. Elliot sat at the end of a long table. He unpacked his lunch, a sandwich, an apple, a wooden whistle his grandfather made. Tinsel noticed it from 2 seats away. What's that? Elliot looked up quickly. Oh, it's just a whistle. Can it whistle? Elliot nodded. Button leaned forward. That seems like the main job of whistle. Wobbles said, unless it's decorative. I once had a decorative spoon. You ate pudding with it, said Sprig. Exactly, decoratively. Elliot held the whistle carefully. My grandfather carved it. It sounds like a mountain bird. Can we hear it, said Tinsel. Elliot froze. The whole table looked at him. His heart thumped. He wanted to play it. But what if it squeaked? What if it laughed? What if the mountain bird sounded silly at the North Pole? Maybe later, he said softly, putting it back in his lunchbox. The table went quiet for a moment, then everybody turned to eating. But Elliot felt smaller than before. That afternoon, the class went outside for snow games. The favorite snow game of the North Pole School was sleigh tag. It was simple. Somebody pulled a tiny sled with another student sat inside, and the teams raced from snow cone markers to the big peppermint pole. Elliot never played sleigh tag. In his old village, they played pine cold roll, which involved rolling pine cones down hills and then pretending that they had meant to go crooked. Mrs. Merriweather divided everybody into teams. Elliot, would you like to join Sprig and Button? Elliot nodded. Button smiled. Great, you can ride first. Elliot climbed into the little sled. Sprig grabbed the rope. Ready? Elliot nodded. Sprig ran. The sled moved. Then it hit a bump. Elliot bounced. His hat flew off. He slid sideways into a snowbank with only his boots sticking out. For one tiny second, everybody was silent. Then Wobbles said, I give that landing a snow out of 10. Everybody laughed. Elliot heard the laughter from inside the snowbank. His face burned. He knew they were not trying to be cruel, but sometimes laughter could feel sharp when you are already nervous. Sprig pulled him out. Are you okay? Elliot brushed snow from his glasses. I'm fine. But he was not fine. Not really. The rest of the day felt long. Then the final bell rang. Elliot packed his bag slowly. Mrs. Merriweather came over. First days can feel big, she said gently. Elliot nodded. Everybody already has friends. That can be hard. They already know the games, yes, and the jokes. Mrs. Merriweather smiled. I'm not sure anybody truly understands Wobble's jokes. Elliot smiled a little. Mrs. Merriweather sat beside his desk. Did you know what I noticed today? Elliot shook his head. You kept trying, even when it felt uncomfortable. Elliot looked down. I didn't talk much. Trying doesn't always look loud, she said. Sometimes trying is just staying in the room. That made Elliot feel a little better. Not all the way better, but a little. The next morning, Elliot almost asked to stay home. His mother packed his lunch and noticed his quiet face. Worried about school? Elliot nodded. What if I don't fit? His mother tucked the wooden whistle into his lunchbox. Sometimes fitting in takes time, but belonging starts when someone sees the real you. What if they don't? Then give them a little chance. Elliot sighed. A little chance sounds hard. His mother smiled. Most brave things do. At school, Mrs. Merriweather announced a special project. This Friday, she said, our class will perform a welcome song at the Winter Lights gathering. The students cheered. Everybody will help, said Mrs. Merriweather, singing bells, rhythm sticks, and instruments. Elliot's fingers touched the whistle in his pocket. He knew the perfect sound for a perfect winter song. A mountain bird call, a soft, clear, beautiful, but saying so felt impossible. The class practiced all morning. Tinsel sang the melody, Button played bells, Sprig tapped rhythm sticks, Wobble was given a triangle and told to use it only when instructed. This was wise because Wobbles believed every song needs surprise dinging. Elliot stood in the back, quietly singing. During practice, the song sounded nice, but something was missing. Miss Merriweather tilted her head. It needs, one more sound, she said. Something light, something that feels like morning over snow. Elliot's heart jumped. His whistle. He knew it. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Tinsel said, maybe more bells. Button shook his head. Too shiny. Wobbles raised the triangle. Mrs. Merriweather gently lowered his hand. Not yet, dear. Elliot swallowed. His voice hid again. At recess, he sat on the bench near the snow garden. Santa happened to be walking by carrying a small stack of letters. Now, Santa Papa John, me, would often visit the school. He liked seeing what children and elves were learning, and he especially liked checking whether glitter control had improved. He saw Elliot sitting alone. Well now, I said warmly, this bench looks like it has room for two. Elliot looked up. Hi, Santa. Santa sat beside him with a soft chuckle. New student, are we, Elliot? Now that can feel like wearing boots on the wrong feet, Santa said. Elliot blinked. Have you done that? Once. I walked in a circle for 20 minutes, Elliot laughed. Santa smiled. What's on your heart? Elliot hesitated. Then he pulled out his wooden whistle. My grandfather made this. It sounds like a mountain bird. I think it would help the class song, but what? I'm new. What if they think it's strange? I held the whistle carefully and looked at it. My dear Elliot, every good song becomes better when somebody adds their own true note. Elliot looked at him. What if my note doesn't fit? Santa handed the whistle back. Then perhaps it helps the song grow. That afternoon, the class practiced again. The song still needed something. Mrs. Merriweather sighed softly. It is lovely, but it needs a little magic. Elliot felt the whistle in his hand. His heart thumped. He remembered his mother. A little chance. He remembered Mrs. Merriweather. Trying doesn't always look loud. He remembered me, Santa, your own true note. Elliot raised his hand. Just a little. Mrs. Merriweather saw him. Yes, Elliot. Everybody's face turned. Elliot's knees felt wobbly. I have a whistle. It sounds like a mountain bird. Maybe it could help. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then Wobbles whispered, a mountain bird whistle sounds way better than surprise dinging. Mrs. Merriweather smiled. Would you like to try? Elliot nodded. He lifted the whistle to his lips. He blew gently. A clear, sweet note floated through the room. It sounded like wind over snowy tires. Trees. That morning, like morning light on mountain peaks. Like a little bird calling, here I am. The classroom went still. Tinsel's eyes widened. That's beautiful. Button nodded. That is definitely the missing magic. Sprig grinned. Can you play it after the second chorus? Wobble raised his triangle, and then I ding. Mrs. Merriweather looked at him. One small ding. Wobbles whispered, my moment has come. Everybody laughed. This time Elliot laughed too, and the laughter felt warm, not sharp. Friday evening arrived. The winter lights gathering filled the schoolyard with lanterns. cocoa tables, families twinkling garlands. Elliot stood with the class near the little wooden stage. He was nervous, very nervous. His whistle felt smooth in his hand. Tinsel leaned over. I'm glad you're here. Elliot looked at her. You are? Yes, she said. Our song needed you. Those words filled the quiet place inside him. When it was time, the class stepped onto the stage. Mrs. Merriweather gave the signal. Tinsel began singing. Button's bells joined. Sprig's rhythm sticks tapped softly. Then came Elliot's part. He lifted the whistle, and for 1 second he was scared again. Then he saw Santa in the crowd smiling. Elliot played. Mountain bird call rang out clear and beautiful. The audience grew quiet. Then Wobbles added one perfect triangle ding. Just one. And miraculously, really, the song ended and the whole schoolyard burst into applause. Elliot's face glowed. Afterwards, students gathered around him. Can you teach me that, said Button. Can you make another bird sound, said Sprig. Can it sound like a cookie, asked Wobbles. No, said Elliot. Worth asking, said Wobbles. Tinsel smiled. You should sit with us on Monday. Elliot smiled back. I'd like that. Later that night, as lanterns glowed and snowflakes drifted down, Santa found Elliot near the giving tree. Well, Santa said, it seems your true note found a home. Elliot looked at the tree. On one branch hung his blue paper star. He had finally written his message. There is room for your voice. I, Santa, read it and nodded. That is a fine kindness ornament. Elliot smiled. I think I understand now. What's that? I didn't have to be like everyone else to belong. Santa's eyes twinkled. No, my boy. Belonging is not about becoming the same. It's about being welcomed as yourself. On Monday, Elliot walked into the North Pole School of Wonder feeling different. Not because everything was easy, not because he was never nervous again, not because he knew he had something to share. At lunch, he sat with Tinsel, Button, Sprig, and Wobbles. Wobbles leaned forward. I have a new joke. Tinsel groaned. Elliot smiled. Let's hear it. Wobbles cleared his throat. Why did the gingerbread student bring a ladder to school? Button sighed. Why? Because he wanted to go to High Cookie. Everybody laughed. Even Mrs. Merriweather laughed from across the room, though she tried to hide it behind a lesson plan. Elliot took out his whistle. Maybe I can make a sound for that joke. He played one tiny cheerful note. The table clapped, and from that day on, North Pole School of Wonder had something new, a mountain bird sound in its songs. A new friend at its lunch table, a blue star at the giving tree, and one small elf who learned that being new was not the same as being alone. It was simply the beginning of being known. Here's the moral of the story. Being new can feel scary, lonely, and uncertain, but it can also be the beginning of wonderful friendship and beautiful discoveries. You do not have to change who you are to belong. The special things that make you different may be exactly what others need. When you welcome others with kindness and have the courage to share our true voice, you help create a special place where everybody feels seen, valued, and included. Wasn't that awesome, boys and girls, lady mums and dads? Sometimes do you feel alone? It's okay to ask for help or asking that you need help. It's okay. Santa believes that everybody's in. So I hope you enjoyed that story. I hope you tell your friends that you saw Santa reading stories. And you can come back for the next story time by Santa. Ho, ho, ho. Santa loves you.
Warning, the brown cloud is approaching. Some will try to outrun it. Others may not be so lucky. But don't worry, it's all part of the fun at the Chili Cook-Off for books and board games. Where the chili is hot, the flavors are bold. And Bear E has your back with the official Brown Cloud Preparedness Kit. Follow the plan, know your exits, and whatever you do, hold your breath, because this temporary pain is all for a great cause. Join us, laugh with us, survive the brown cloud, together at Key Largo Lounge in Greeley.
Join us November 8th at 11 a.m. for the 10th annual Chili Cook-Off for books and board games at our home field, Key Largo Lounge, where our small market team is making a huge statement. Scan the code for tickets and sponsorship information.